Story 1. The movie Event Horizon by Paul W. S. Anderson completely unsettled me when I first watched it. I was around 10 or 12 years old when I saw it with my family. It still gives me nightmares today. Story 2. My parents were horror movie fanatics, so in the early 1980s I remember seeing The Omen, the Amityville Horror, Alien, Poltergeist, Nightmare on Elm Street, and other movies like these on VHS. I was under 10 when I saw these, so they were not really age-appropriate. Specific scenes from each of these movies embedded themselves into my psyche, but the Amityville Horror was probably the most terrifying to me. Story 3. Child's Play. Watched it at 5 years old. It affected me deeply. Then Bride of Chucky at 7. I developed a lifelong crush on Jennifer Tilly, but I also had recurring nightmares of being hunted down by Chucky. In fact, typing this comment is probably enough to trigger a nightmare tonight. Story 4. My mom and I were watching It when I was 12, but I am fine. However, my brother was 2 at the time, and we thought he was playing with his toys and not paying any attention to the movie. Turns out he was. A week or so later, I was taking him to the playground behind our house, and he became very upset when I tried to get him to step onto the curb by a storm drain. Even then, I did not understand why he was reacting that way. I just picked him up and carried him. I forgot all about it. Every single time I took him there, he became distressed. Finally, I told our mom about it and she figured it out. It did not matter, though. The damage was done. He would not go near a storm drain after that. He still avoids them if possible and hates clowns. He is 35 now. Story 5. This was not a horror movie, but I watched Watership Down as a kid and it scared me. In addition to the rabbits becoming sick, the image of the scary rabbit that killed the other one was disturbing. The movie was sad and dark. It is actually a very complex movie and book, quite disturbing, and definitely not for children. Story 6. The exorcism of Emily Rose when she is jumping up and down saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 scared me. Story 7. Not technically horror but Watership Down. This is a cartoon. It is fine for the toddlers to watch it, says my grandmother as she walks out of the room and leaves us with years of nightmares to come. Story 8. I was around 7 years old when I saw the birds at my cousin's house. I was scared and affected for so long that I had to keep my bedroom door closed every night to feel safe. The scene where they find the neighbor in the house after an attack is seared in my mind. Story 9. My dad made my sister and me watch Misery. I was about 9 years old. I am 35 now and still cannot watch it. I remember the worst scenes. Story 10. Nightmare on Elm Street. I was 8 years old when my sister let me watch it. It affected me deeply. To this day, I dislike horror movies. Story 11. A movie and a show. I saw all of them and then 1000 Was to Die. It literally traumatized me so much I couldn't sleep for weeks. I became a big germaphobe and wouldn't eat any food that touched my hands, no matter how much I washed them. If I did, I would have a complete breakdown. I was 9 or 10 years old and afraid of death. It didn't help that my grandmother died around that time. Story 12. Fire in the Sky. It affected me deeply, but it was much harder on my little brother. If you haven't seen it, it's a very intense alien abduction story based on allegedly true events. There are many graphic scenes depicting extraterrestrials performing invasive and terrifying experiments on a human subject. I was 9 at the time, but my brother was 7. The only reason we had the opportunity to watch it was because my uncle was babysitting us while our parents were out. His discretion for these types of things was obviously poor. When the movie ended, he laughed at how shaken up we were. To make matters worse, he told us he needed to move his work van to the back alley behind our house so my dad could park when they returned. The alley was scary enough in broad daylight. It was adjacent to a mortuary where the owner, a very mean and scary old man, would frequently yell at us and chase us away if we got near the property. As we drove down the alley in the dark, the van began to shudder and my uncle looked down at the wheel as if something was wrong. The van stopped and wouldn't move. He told us to wait inside while he checked it out. We begged, screamed, and cried, asking him to stay with us. As he got out and stood in front of the van, he looked up to the sky and screamed, then abruptly fell to the ground. We panicked and immediately began screaming and sobbing. A few seconds later, he popped up and collapsed on the hood, causing another round of screaming and sobbing. He laughed harder than I have ever seen him laugh in his life. My brother was seriously traumatized. He couldn't go to the bathroom or shower without someone waiting outside the door for about 3 years. We both had nightmares for a very long time. It's strange but not at all funny. If my brother did that to my child, I would be deeply upset. Story 13. The first nightmare on Elm Street, the part where he gets pulled down in the bed. I have not slept in the middle of the bed since 1984. Story 14. Wrong turn at age 11 living in farmlands. Many wrong turns were made after watching that movie, and I did not deal well. Also, I thought Paranormal Activity was real at age 15. Story 15. I don't know if it really qualifies, but for me it was Coraline. I was 7 when I first saw it, and the other mother scared me so much that I slept in my parents' room for over a week. I was terrified of waking up and having my parents replaced by monsters with buttons for eyes. 20 years later, I still get the same feeling of raw terror when I watch the scene of the other mother transforming, even though it is not nearly as scary as it was when I was 7. Story 16. The Exorcist. I know many can relate, but I still carry the fear with me until now. I am turning 29 this year. Story 17. I pretended to be asleep while my parents watched Silence of the Lambs. It was equally terrifying and beautiful. Story 18. The Exorcist and Poltergeist both scared me and bothered me for a long time afterward. Story 19. The 1980s and 1990s. Oh boy, which movies didn't mess me up? Hellraiser, Gremlins, Tales from the Crypt movies and show, Predator, Aliens, The Silence of the Lambs, The Terminator. Even the non-horror movies were messed up. RoboCop is just bonkers by today's standards. Story 20. Pet Cemetery. I was 4 or 5 years old when I saw it at the drive-in with my mother. To this day, it scares me a lot. Story 21. The original Alfred Hitchcock film Psycho terrified me the first time I watched it around age 9. I do not recommend watching it, especially as a child. Story 22. The Shining was not meant for 7-year-olds. I used to do the red rum thing on the elementary school bus. But that bloody elevator and those creepy twins gave me nightmares for years. Story 23. Signs. Every time I showered, I thought an alien head would pop out of the small window and look at me with those high-ass eyeballs. Story 24. Poltergeist and Pet Cemetery. I still cannot look under beds without getting the heebie-jeebies. And that Sister Zelda saying, "You will never walk again," scarred me. Story 25. My mom had no idea what it was when I, entirely too young, begged her to let me rent it. Freaked me out to shower for a long time. Story 26. Not technically a horror movie, but I was 9, so it might as well have been. The Passion of the Christ in theaters with my religious parents was awful. Story 27. I grew up in the 1980s, and my father loved horror movies. Thanks to Nickelodeon at night, we had Hitchcock Presents, an hour-long show, and we watched those. I was 4 years old when I watched Friday the 13th. I was 6 when I saw The Exorcist, and I think The Entity as well. I was 7 when I watched An American Werewolf in London, and that transformation scene terrified me. I will say that combined together, they definitely did a fantastic job of shaping my life, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Story 28. The Exorcist. No question. I think I was 8 years old when my babysitter let me watch it. My little sister came into my room in the middle of the night, and she looked just like the devil. That frightened me for a long time. Amazing movie, though. Story 29. The Return of the Living Dead 3. I was 8 when I watched it. Trigger warning. It made me think that self-harm is okay. I never went on a motorbike because of it. Story 30. My mom and I used to watch horror movies together when I was about 9. Nothing crazy, just ones like Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, and Halloween. One night she decided to put on it, and for some reason that movie messed me up for years. I was scared of washing my hands, showering, and don't even get me started on those sidewalk drains. Story 31. Tusk. I am not even going to really call it a horror movie, more so a grotesque movie like The Human Centipede. I cannot understand who would stomach these movies. If I found out my girlfriend was a huge fan of this genre, we would seriously have to break up. I question the mental state of this audience. Story 32. I watched Fire in the Sky when I was about 10 or 11. I am still to this day very afraid of being abducted by extraterrestrials. Story 33. The Ring, Chucky, I hate dolls because of that, Ju-on, The Grudge, Pet Sematary, Aliens with Sigourney Weaver, the alien getting sucked out of a tiny hole, The Facehuggers, I couldn't eat eggs for months, Rosemary's Baby, and The Birds. Story 34. Not a movie but an episode of the Outer Limits television show where a spaceship crashes on an asteroid. The crew is attacked by spiders that latch on, paralyze them, and cause hallucinations. Thank you very much, Dad. Story 35. Not a horror movie, but seeing Anakin Skywalker get dismembered and burned alive as he screams, "I hate you," at the end of Star Wars Episode 3 really upset me as a kid. Story 36. Chucky. I was really young, 3 or 4, and it was on television. My parents thought it was just about a talking doll until he started killing people. Traumatized me for years. Story 37. I can't remember the name, but a woman was in this room, and a face looked like it was pressing through the walls. Scared me a lot. Story 38. Saw. Jigsaw setting up his impossible death traps for his victims. Sometimes the only way to escape is by wounding yourself, such as cutting off pieces of your limbs, brain, and even eyes. This was very disturbing. Story 39. I do not know the name of it, but it has something to do with Bigfoot. It grabbed a girl by the waist while she was showering and completely broke her spine to drag her out the small window. I still see the scene every time I close my eyes. Story 40. It was not supposed to be a horror movie, but I watched The Black Hole way too young and it affected me. Watching a man get shredded by a robot at 6 years old was disturbing. The funny thing is, I love the movie now. It is very atmospheric. Disney's darkest film. Story 41. I didn't even watch the actual movie but saw the trailer for The Visit in grade 6 on another classmate's phone, and it had me on edge for about a year. My mind would fill in all the gaps between the cuts and limited information provided in the trailer for hours, to the point where it became a nightly obsession. It heavily contributed to the development of my obsessive-compulsive disorder in childhood. I also had an irrational fear of my family suddenly becoming like the scary grandparents or staying over at other people's homes, especially my own grandparents, for a long time. Story 42. Not a horror movie, but a thriller by Michael Jackson. I was shaking, screaming, and crying the whole time. Story 43. My son was very young and loved his extraterrestrial shirt. We played the movie, had the sound up, extraterrestrial and Elliot encountered each other in the dark, and thus began his terror of extraterrestrial into his teens. Story 44. The Ring was only 4 feet tall. I moved the television into my closet for years until I decided to just make the dead girl my friend in my head. Story 45. A Japanese horror film when I was about 7 or 8, too young to know the name, and my adult siblings had it on. They told me to look away when I was scared, so I spent much of the movie staring at an air conditioner vent. I still hate looking at black garbage bags because of that movie. Story 46. The Thing, the original movie, was shown as the monthly movie to my entire elementary school. Definitely not for kids under 11. Story 47. Darkness Falls is a creepy movie about a killer tooth fairy that cannot come into the light at all. I am in my late 20s with a child, and I am still scared of the dark to this day. Also, Dreamcatcher. The characters made me uneasy for a very long time, and I still do not like public toilets, which can be dirty. Story 48. I ended up fixating on Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory at age 5 when the chocolate tube scene scared me. I forced myself to rewatch it several times to overcome my fear. Story 49. I read the Wikipedia page for the Human Centipede before youth group, and everyone was mildly concerned about the disturbed look on my face. Story 50. Did not bat an eye at The Exorcist at 4 years old. House of 1,000 Corpses at 8 years, however, was too much. Never rewatched it and still will not. Bonus. Watched Mother at 22 and do not know if I will ever be old enough to watch that movie again. Story 51. When I was a little kid, my parents had no concept that animated Japanese shows were for adults and not children. They thought cartoons were inherently for kids. So my brother would rent a bunch of animated Japanese shows from the video store, and I would watch. Before I turned 7, I watched Akira, Genocyber, Vampire Hunter D, Robot Carnival, it has some haunting scenes, and The Guyver. That probably affected me a bit. Story 52. Far from being traumatized, watching horror movies in the 1980s was hilarious. They usually involved a group of teenagers in a supposedly empty house. Bumps and groans, and not just romantic encounters, ensue. The logical conclusion is, let's split up to search the house. What could possibly go wrong? Story 53. The Tale of Two Sisters, the Korean one. That scene with the ghost under the kitchen sink still haunts me. Story 54. The Ring. I watched it at a sleepover when I was about 10, and I truly unplugged my television for a week. To this day, if a screen glitches even a little, my soul leaves my body. Story 55. The Strangers made me constantly think people were going to break in and murder me. It just felt too real, and I definitely will not be watching it again. Story 56. Watership Down. I have rabbit children since I could not have human children. I forgot about this movie until I saw it on YouTube. The feelings I had were confusing, upsetting, and overwhelming. It triggered something deep inside as my rabbits grow old and leave us. I have both rabbit and human children now. I co-parent with my late brother's adoptive children. Our kids view our pets as siblings. I have banned even the idea of watching that movie. My children are traumatized enough. Story 57. Child's Play. When I was about 4 years old, my sister had an accident, and my mom had to go with her in the ambulance to the hospital. The only option my mom had for me and my brother was the neighbor, whose teenage son was a sociopath. He received a life sentence in prison for murdering his wife, along with other crimes, including animal cruelty, which I also witnessed. He showed me and my brother a movie while we waited for our grandmother to pick us up. No horror movie has scared me since. Story 58. Not even a horror movie, but I definitely watched Jurassic Park too young. I had nightmares for years. Story 59. Mom loved horror movies and had loads on Betamax tapes. Evil Dead, Friday the 13th, Rosemary's Killer all scared me. But Salem's Lot was the one that gave me a fear of sleeping with the curtains open. Story 60. Psycho. I think I was 6 to 8 years old. It was the first real scary movie my mom allowed me to watch. I thought it was terrifying. I didn't understand the movie at all, but I was fascinated and wanted to know why that man dressed up like his mother. This film definitely altered my brain chemistry. Since then, I have been very into horror movies and continue to watch all kinds of them. I am a big fan of serial killer movies and very interested in violent true crime. The interest has finally settled down after having my children. I see how dark the films made me, how paranoid and unhappy they made me. I think maybe I would have been a better person without all that garbage in my head. Story 61. The Ring US version gave me nightmares and paranoia so bad that I did not watch anything but DVDs for a long while. I have become very aware that I should never watch the original Japanese version. Story 62. It's not actually a horror film but a television episode. One of those soap operas, maybe Days of Our Lives. My mother had left the television playing when we got home from school, and I watched it at age 6. This man was being pulled into a wardrobe and was screaming while others tried to pull him out. Terrified me. I slept with a statue of the Virgin Mary for months, and my parents had to check the cupboard every night. Story 63. I feel ashamed saying this as an adult, but the Blair Witch Project scared me a lot. I was 7 or 8 when I watched it during my older sister's movie night. Our house was surrounded by forest that looked very similar. Story 64. Chucky. I was terrified of any dolls that resembled humans or had realistic human traits for a while because of that. Story 65. Clockwork Orange. We watched it at 12 when our parents were out. The idea literally made me feel physically sick for weeks. Story 66. Jeepers Creepers absolutely terrified me at 13. I am 35 now, and I am still terrified to even watch the trailer. Story 67. The Shining. It was on like the American Broadcasting Company's Friday night movie or something. I was like 9. They did not really edit out the horrible parts. That elevator blood scene scarred me for life. It probably explains a lot about Generation X. Story 68. I saw a clip from a Serbian film in the early days of the internet, and I thought it was real until a few days ago. I wish I had never seen it, and now I am not quite sure how to feel, knowing it is not real. Story 69. Watch Stephen King's Rose Red miniseries in one sitting at about 7 years old. I swear I did not sleep for a month. Story 70. Phantasm. I thought the little minion guys were going to come out of the crawl space door in the bedroom. That and the troll from Cat's Eye. Story 71. Final Destination still makes me paranoid about everything from those movies. It makes me anxious during almost every death scene I have watched, so I rarely watch those movies even though they are good. Story 72. Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I was around 10 and my brother was about 6. My father insisted that the whole family watch it at a motel while we were on vacation. I am about to turn 40, and I still do not like clowns. Story 73. I'm still trying to find it. It was an old 1980s or very early 1990s B-horror film featuring a horned demon that could take the form of people. It tricks a group who meet together in a mansion during a torrential storm, one by one, into giving in to their darkest desires so it can steal their souls. The demon uses the souls to open a portal to a demon realm. In one scene, there is an R-rated sex scene with a woman who is convinced the demon is her fantasy man. Afterward, it flays her alive, ripping her back apart. I watched this film alone in the early hours of the morning, coincidentally during a rainstorm, when I was about 10 years old, visiting my mom and her boyfriend, who were horror fans. This film has stayed with me for years. It is the only one I cannot identify to this day. If anyone recognizes these scenes or concepts, I would appreciate the information. Story 74. Total Recall was not a horror movie necessarily, but it definitely did the trick. Arnold Schwarzenegger almost exploding, to be exact. Story 75. Sixth Sense. I started thinking random people I saw were dead. I wasn't meant to watch the movie. I walked in at the worst time, and no one saw me for a few minutes. Story 76. Help me understand why so many parents allow their small children to watch movies that are so inappropriate, to the point of scarring them for the rest of their lives. It angers me deeply. Story 77. Jeepers Creepers. I was 12 or 13 years old, and it was the first movie that did not have a happy ending or a positive resolution. I love scary movies, but I still cannot watch those. Story 78. Terminator. My grandfather was obsessed with horror movies, so when I was 6, he put on Terminator and scarred me for life. I still cannot watch it, and I am over 40. Story 79. Started watching horror films with my dad when I was maybe 3 years old. None ever bothered me, and I never had any nightmares. I am still a massive horror fan. The film that gave me nightmares for weeks after seeing it for the first time was The Lion King. Story 80. Back when I was around 7 or 8, while we were out shopping, my parents handed me a VHS tape and said, "You little man, you have to see this." I remember looking at the cover and seeing some kind of greenish egg and basically going, okay. It was the film Alien from 1979. We went back home and they put it on. I was terrified, paralyzed with fear. I was lying down on the bed in our living room, in the dark, alone, shaking, covering my head with my blanket, while my parents occasionally checked on me, poking fun at my reactions and laughing at how scared I was. I was terrified. I was hooked. A short time later, while I was out with my grandma, at one of the kiosks we passed on our way to a local market, in a window I saw a familiar character. It was the comic Aliens vs. Predator, released in April 2000 here in Poland by TM Semik in their Top Comics series. It was actually a reprint of the Aliens vs. Predator Annual Number 1 by Dark Horse Comics. I immediately asked her to buy it. She didn't care. It was just a comic book, right? She was none the wiser. Couldn't believe it. This character I saw on the screen, this design in a comic book. Up to this point, I had only been reading Donald Duck. What is this? I was definitely 8 years old when this came out. I couldn't grasp the concept of an expanded universe just yet. My uncle was an art student. He is now an accomplished artist and was heavily inspired by the works of H.R. Geiger and Beksinski. Coincidentally, he had a book of Geiger's art called Art Plus that I started looking through when nobody was watching. I won't go on a tangent about Geiger's work beyond Alien, but it is mesmerizing and hits hard, especially when you are 8 or 9. Fast forward some years. I am now 33, and the Alien universe is one I am heavily invested in. I consider watching the films to be absolutely pivotal, seminal, and formative in my life. There are not enough words of praise in every known language in the universe to express how grateful I am to my parents and extended family for influencing me as a kid. I have seen all the movies countless times, I collect the comic books, I have played all the games, I have albums of Geiger's art, and I have t-shirts. I played Alien on the playground with my friends. In fact, I hooked a couple of them on the universe almost as much as I am hooked myself. I engage daily on the LV426 forum as a certified expert on all things alien and aliens related. I have tactical smart missiles, phased plasma pulse rifles, rocket-propelled grenades, sonic electronic ball breakers, nukes, knives, and sharp sticks. Also, I had unlimited, unsupervised access to the internet from the start. My parents did not care what I was looking at or that I was playing Carmageddon, Grand Theft Auto, Soldier of Fortune, and other games. I loved that. Thank you, Mom, Dad, Grandma, and Uncle. I love you. Story 81. I watched the shower scene from it and the clown scene from Poltergeist, which scared me for years. I was afraid of drains, under the bed, and closets until I was 10. That is 5 years of fear that would paralyze me. It did not help that my mother had a boyfriend who would torment me with those fears. Story 82. Final Destination movies. I did not realize how many fears were developed from those movies until I went back and rewatched them. I am all set for the new sequel now. Story 83, Chucky. I would turn all my dolls around as a kid so they could not face me while I was sleeping in case they came alive and killed me. I still cannot watch those movies now. Story 84, Outbreak. I saw it probably around when it must have come out. I was about 7 years old. Between that movie and a book titled Natural World Disasters, I developed serious contamination-related obsessive-compulsive disorder. I mean, I was probably always that way, but that movie and that book really affected me. I slept with a tiny breathing hole with sheets wrapped over my head, thinking it would protect me from diseases until I was about 26. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.